In TV moments, where every second is streamed live, the line between breaking news and living nightmare has vanished. You're about to witness the moments where the safety of the screen shattered, from frozen graveyards and burning warehouses to the 5-second failures that changed broadcasting forever. These are the 10 most disturbing events ever captured on live television. Number 10. There is a video shot on a phone from a balcony in East Beirut that has been viewed more than 100 million times. A woman is filming a small orange fire at the port across the harbor. For about 40 seconds, nothing happens. Then the warehouse releases a sound the human ear was not designed to process. The camera lurches violently sideways, and her humming turns into a scream that ends before her phone hits the floor. August 4th, 2020, may be the most thoroughly filmed disaster in human history.
The capital, Beirut, has been hit by a massive explosion.
Captured from balconies, car dashboards, rooftop cafes, and from a wedding photographer's drone. From a Facebook live stream by a French architect named Jean-Marc Bonfils, who was narrating the small fire to his followers. When the second blast killed him in front of his own audience. What detonated at 6:08 p.m. was 2,750 tons of ammonia.
Over 2,750 tons of ammonia exploded after being stockpiled at a warehouse for over 6 years.
Abandoned in Warehouse 12 since 2013, flagged repeatedly by customs officials, ignored repeatedly by every minister who could have moved it. The yield was roughly 1.1 kilotons of TNT, registering as a 3.3 magnitude earthquake. The shockwave was heard in Cyprus, 200 kilometers across the Mediterranean. It blew out windows at an airport 5 miles away. It carved a crater 460 feet wide where the warehouse had been and flooded it with seawater. The disturbing part is what you can see in the videos right before the wave hits. People who have no idea. A bride being photographed in a white dress, laughing. Children at a birthday party. An old man on a balcony lighting a cigarette. They have maybe 3 seconds left of the world they understood, and the camera catches the exact frame their faces register that something is wrong.
This is the first time I feel it.
218 people died. 7,000 were injured. 300,000 were made homeless in a single second. The Lebanese cabinet resigned within the week, and nothing was fixed.
After that massive explosion in Beirut and days of relentless protests on the ground, Lebanon's cabinet has resigned.
6 years later, not one official has been convicted. The crater is still there. The videos are still online. And every August, the city still gathers at the port and reads the names of the dead aloud, because nobody in power ever has. Number 9. Politics is often a game of theater, but on January 22, 1987, Pennsylvania State Treasurer R. Bud Dwyer gave a performance that would haunt the American consciousness forever. He walked into that press conference looking exhausted but composed. State Treasurer. The day before, he'd been convicted on 11 federal counts: bribery, mail fraud, racketeering, and was facing up to 55 years in prison.
He faced up to 55 years in prison for his conviction on charges of conspiracy to commit bribery, perjury, mail fraud, and other counts.
Sentencing was the next morning. The reporters in the room assumed they were about to watch a resignation. They were sliding tape into recorders, uncapping pens, settling in for what they thought was a political obituary. Dwyer read from a prepared statement. He thanked his staff, defended his innocence.
I want to thank the people who made it possible, beginning with the good people of Crawford County.
And then, near the end, his voice shifted into something stranger, almost prophetic. He told the room he would die in office so that the shameful facts might set fire to American pride. He asked them to tell his story everywhere. Then, he reached under the podium and pulled out a manila envelope. Inside was a Smith & Wesson .357 Magnum. You can hear it on the tape, the gasps, the chairs scraping backward, a voice shouting, "No, Bud." his own press secretary lunging forward. Dwyer raised one hand to keep them back, calm as a man directing traffic, and said the line, "Please leave the room if this will affect you." Then he put the barrel in his mouth and pulled the trigger. A reporter in the front row, a friend of his named Frederick Cusick, would later admit he should have tackled him the second the envelope appeared. He knew. He froze. Here is where it became one of the most disturbing live TV moments in American history. Contrary to legend, the suicide didn't air live nationally, but Pennsylvania television stations had to make a choice in the next 2 hours, and several of them made the wrong one. Philadelphia's WPVI ran the uncut footage on the 5 and 6 p.m. broadcasts without warning. Harrisburg's WHTM-TV aired it twice, fully unedited, defending the call by pointing to the importance of the story. And because of the snowstorm, kids were home from school. Children watched a man kill himself in their living rooms while waiting for cartoons to come back on. Richard Patrick, the future frontman of the band Filter, was 22 when he saw the raw tape. The image lodged in him so deeply, he eventually wrote a song about it. A song most people sang along to in the 90s, without realizing what Hey Man Nice Shot was actually about. And here's the cruelest twist of all. In 2010, a key witness from Dwyer's trial admitted on camera that he had lied under oath. He had invented the bribe to shorten his own sentence and protect his wife. R. Bud Dwyer, the man who screamed his innocence into a microphone before pulling that trigger, may have been telling the truth the entire time. His death secured his family's pension, over $1.28 million in survivor benefits, because he died in office instead of resigning. Some who knew him believe that was the real reason he did it, a father's last accounting trick, a final budget item paid in blood. Number 8. January 28, 1986 was supposed to be the day that space became ours. For the first time in history, NASA wasn't just sending elite test pilots and scientists into the thermosphere. They were sending a teacher. Krista McAuliffe was the teacher in space, a symbol of a future where the stars were accessible to everyone. Millions of children sat cross-legged on linoleum floors, staring up at CRT televisions, waiting to see their hero touch the sky. At 11:38 a.m., Challenger climbed off the pad at Kennedy Space Center in a perfect white plume.
3, 2, 1, and liftoff.
The launch looked flawless. And then, 73 seconds in, the sky cracked open. A flash. A sudden branching cloud of vapor. 2 solid rocket boosters spiraling outward like loose fireworks across a blue Florida sky. The shuttle was simply gone. For several long seconds, nobody understood what they had just seen. Inside Mission Control, the calm voice kept reading telemetry as if nothing had happened. And then came that footage, Krista McAuliffe's mother and father in the viewing stands. Faces frozen. In the exact instant, joy collapsed into horror. That single image would haunt the 20th century. The most disturbing thing is the chilling realization that this wasn't an unpredictable act of God, but a calculated, bureaucratic gamble that failed. While the public saw a sudden fireball, the engineers at Morton Thiokol were living through a slow-motion horror story before the fuse was even lit. He had begged NASA not to launch. Cold weather, they warned, would stiffen the rubber O-ring seals on the boosters. Their cutoff was 53 degrees Fahrenheit. The temperature on the pad that morning was 36 degrees Fahrenheit. They were overruled. Sociologist Diane Vaughan would later give the cause a chilling name: the normalization of deviance, the slow, quiet process by which a fatal risk becomes background noise inside an institution. 7 astronauts died. And here's the detail nobody likes to talk about. Investigators believe the crew cabin survived the breakup intact, falling for nearly 3 minutes before hitting the Atlantic. At least some of them may have been awake the entire way down. A generation of children learned, on live television, that the adults in charge are not always right. And some mistakes don't get a second take. Number 7. Las Vegas, October 3, 2003. Inside the Mirage, in a theater built to feel like a sultan's fever dream, 1,500 tourists watched two German illusionists make 600-pound predators float through the air like silk scarves. Kids on parents' shoulders, honeymooners holding hands, cameras flashing despite the rules. Roy Horn, who had just celebrated his 59th birthday the night before, with 500 guests, dancing past midnight, joking that he'd retire only when his body refused to lift another tiger, walked on stage about 45 minutes into the show and let out a 7-year-old white tiger named Manticore. Then, Manticore drifted off his mark. He started moving toward the edge of the stage, toward the audience and the children sitting just feet away. Roy stepped between the tiger and the crowd, gave a verbal command, tapped the cat lightly on the head. Manticore didn't lie down. He reached up with one massive paw and took Roy's wrist in his mouth. Roy slipped the chain. He kept tapping, release, release. And here is where the audience betrayed itself. People laughed. Some of them clapped. Because for a few seconds, this looked like part of the act. The moment before the smoke billows and everything resolves. Tourist Tony Cohen was 10 yards from the stage and would later tell reporters that nobody around him moved. Their brains couldn't override the script. Then, Roy fell backward. Manticore was on top of him in a heartbeat. The tiger clamped his jaws around Roy's throat and began dragging him off stage. Siegfried Fischbacher came running across the platform screaming, "No, no, no." An audience member named Andy Cushman later put it in 5 words that nobody who heard them ever forgot. He said, "Roy looked like a rag doll." Backstage, in chaos, crew members blasted Manticore with a fire extinguisher. When the foam didn't work, they hit him with the metal canister itself. When they finally pried Roy from the tiger's jaws, the damage was catastrophic. The bite had crushed Roy's windpipe and severed his jugular vein. But he was still conscious enough to whisper one sentence to the people trying to save his life: "Don't shoot the cat." The aftermath was a medical nightmare. Roy suffered a massive stroke on the operating table, necessitating the removal of a quarter of his skull to relieve the pressure on his swelling brain. He survived, but the Superman of Vegas was left partially paralyzed and unable to speak for months. Perhaps most disturbing of all is the debate that followed. Siegfried and Roy spent the rest of their lives insisting that Manticore was actually trying to save Roy, that the tiger sensed Roy was having a stroke and tried to carry him to safety the only way a tiger knows how: by the neck. But animal behaviorists tell a much darker story. They point out that a saving carry by a mother tiger is gentle. Manticore's was a precision strike designed to end life. The magic died that night. The show was canceled indefinitely, and the Mirage's most famous residents were replaced by a haunting silence. It remains a disturbing testament to the fact that no matter how many lights you shine or how much glitter you throw, a predator's instinct is a clock that never stops ticking. It only waits for the right second to strike. Number 6. Monday Night Football. January 2nd, 2023. The biggest stage in American sports. Cincinnati versus Buffalo. 2 teams fighting for AFC playoff seeding, and an audience of over 23 million people leaned forward in their living rooms as the first quarter ticked down. Bengals quarterback Joe Burrow threw a short pass to wide receiver T. Higgins. Hamlin closed in and delivered a clean, textbook hit to Higgins' chest. He bounced back to his feet immediately. He took 2 steps. And then, in front of 65,000 people in the stadium and millions more on ESPN, he simply collapsed straight backward. Like a marionette whose strings had been cut, he didn't move. What happened over the next 8 minutes is something American television had never quite shown before. Cameras zoomed in on Hamlin lying motionless on his back at the 30-yard line.
And that is Damar Hamlin.
Bills players sprinted onto the field, then froze. The Bengals players froze with them. And then medical personnel began doing something nobody in a football broadcast booth is trained to narrate. They started administering CPR chest compressions, right there, under the stadium lights. His heart had stopped. Cardiac arrest. From a single, ordinary hit. Doctors would later determine it was commotio cordis, a freak phenomenon, where impact at the exact wrong millisecond of a heartbeat sends the heart into chaos. The window for it is about 40 milliseconds wide. Hamlin had hit it. Inside the broadcast booth, Joe Buck and Troy Aikman did something rare for live sports television.
What we all feel, you think about the Hamlin family and what they're all going through, that's the focus, but
they went quiet. Buck later said his instinct in that moment was not to talk, that putting words to a man receiving CPR in the middle of a stadium felt obscene. ESPN cut to commercial. They came back. They cut to commercial again. They refused to replay the hit beyond the first two angles. The screen kept returning to one image: a circle of Buffalo Bills players, grown men the size of refrigerators, on their knees on the turf, helmets off, openly sobbing. Some praying, some holding each other, some staring at the sky like they were waiting for an answer that wasn't coming. A haunting transition from a stadium filled with deafening cheers to a silence so profound you could hear the heartbeat of the players. A heartbeat that, for Damar Hamlin, had officially stopped. Strangers in Bengals jerseys held strangers in Bills jerseys. Someone in section 134 started singing a hymn. By the time the ambulance left the stadium, his heart had been restarted on the field and stopped again before he reached the hospital. In studios across America, anchors who had spent their careers preparing to call touchdowns sat dumbstruck, staring into cameras with nothing intelligent to say. Booger McFarland, the former player turned analyst, finally spoke for everyone watching. "I think we reached a point where nobody is concerned about football anymore tonight."
Yeah, I think we reached a point a little while ago where nobody's concerned about football anymore tonight.
The NFL took nearly an hour to officially suspend the game. Most viewers had stopped caring about the score the moment Hamlin's body hit the grass. The contest that ESPN had spent a week promoting as the game of the season was canceled and never rescheduled. The league, for once, recognized there was no version of restarting that night that wouldn't be grotesque. Number 5. A hand-painted banner flutters in the wind above the busiest freeway interchange in the world. It isn't an advertisement, and it isn't a prank. It is a suicide note written in 6-foot-tall letters. On April 30th, 1998, the spectacle of the Los Angeles police chase took a turn into the hyper-realistic. While the city's news helicopters were circling a stalled white pickup truck on the transition ramp between the 105 and 405, they were filming the final, agonizing moments of a man named Daniel Jones. Jones was a maintenance worker who had reached a breaking point. Battling cancer and HIV, he felt the healthcare system, specifically his HMO, had abandoned him to die. He decided that if he was going to go, he was going to make the world watch the industry he blamed for his demise. Jones didn't just park his truck, he turned the freeway into a stage. After setting his vehicle on fire, with his pet dog still inside, he paced the asphalt, agitated and clutching a shotgun. The local news stations, desperate for the money that drives ratings, stayed zoomed in. There was no delay in safety net. As Jones walked to the edge of the concrete overpass, the cameras followed every step. Suddenly, the screen wasn't showing a protest anymore. It was showing a graphic, live-action ending. Because this happened at 3 p.m., the broadcast didn't just hit news junkies.
And later, we learned more about who the man was. His name, Daniel Victor Jones.
It cut directly into children's programming. Kids who had been waiting for their favorite cartoons were suddenly staring at a man placing a shotgun under his chin. The news anchors in the background, realizing too late that they hadn't pulled the camera back, added a layer of auditory horror to the visual trauma. The cruelest detail: Daniel Jones had a message, a real, specific, articulate message about a healthcare system that he believed was killing him. He had typed it onto a banner. He had timed his death to the moment the cameras would be guaranteed to look. And the next morning, almost nobody talked about HMOs. They talked about broadcast ethics, and whether children should have been protected from what they saw. The man's actual final words were treated as a footnote to the spectacle of his death. This single, disturbing afternoon became the never-again moment for broadcast journalism. It is the direct reason why, today, live news feeds operate on a mandatory 5-second delay. Number 4. Ginter Parcha was unemployed and was obsessed with a woman who had never heard his name. Was Steffi Graf, the German tennis goddess, the national pride, the blonde-haired symbol of post-reunification athletic perfection. Parcha kept her newspaper clippings. He kept her photos. And in his small, sour, isolated mind, he had developed a single grievance against the universe. Somebody else was beating her. A teenager. A 19-year-old prodigy from Yugoslavia named Monica Seles, who in the previous 3 years had won 8 Grand Slam titles and made Steffi Graf, for the first time in her career, look mortal. April 30th, 1993. The Citizen Cup quarterfinals in Hamburg, a mid-tier European tournament, playing out in front of a few thousand spectators and broadcast live across Germany. Seles was riding a run of 22 consecutive singles titles and had just torn through her opponent, Magdalena Malieva, taking the first set and leading 4-3 in the second. The match was effectively over. Seles dropped into her changeover chair, toweled the sweat from her face, leaned forward to take a sip of water from a paper cup, and felt something cold and sharp slide between her shoulder blades. In her own words, written years later, she turned her head and saw a man in a baseball cap, a sneer cutting across his face, his arms raised above his head, with both hands wrapped around a 9-inch boning knife. He was lunging at her again. "I didn't understand what was happening," she would write. Spectators sitting a few feet away saw the whole thing in real time. The German broadcast cameras caught every frame. A man had simply leaned over the low railing separating the front row from the court and buried a knife in her back. Security tackled him before he could swing again. Seles staggered to her feet, blood soaking through the back of her white tennis dress, and collapsed into her father's arms. She was lucky in the most technical sense of the word. The blade went in about 1.5 inches. It missed her spinal cord. The physical wound healed in weeks. The psychological wound never healed at all. Monica Seles did not play another professional tennis match for 27 months. She developed what today would be diagnosed instantly as post-traumatic stress disorder. Nightmares that woke her up sweating. Long stretches of time where she barely left her apartment. Chris Evert later told a story of running into Seles at the Miami airport 2 years after the attack and watching her physically hide in the back of the plane to avoid being seen. Her father, the man who had drawn cartoons on tennis balls to keep her interested as a child in Novi Sad, was diagnosed with terminal cancer during her recovery and died in 1998. Seles played the French Open final months later in all black, her dad's wedding ring strung around her neck on a chain. But the part that turned this from a tragedy into something genuinely obscene happened in a German courtroom. Parcha was tried for his crime. He confessed to everything on camera. He explained his motive openly. The German court convicted him of causing grievous bodily harm, not attempted murder, on the reasoning that he had only meant to wound her, not kill her. They handed him a 2-year suspended sentence. He walked out of the courthouse a free man and went home to watch tennis on television. He stabbed a teenage girl in the back in front of thousands of spectators on live television, and he never spent a single night in prison. Martina Navratilova said the quiet part out loud, the thing everyone in tennis was thinking and almost nobody had the courage to say. If someone had done this to Steffi Graf in order to help Monica Seles win, they would have thrown away the key. And here's the part that no amount of inspirational comeback narrative can sand down. Steffi Graf, freed from the rival who had been beating her, went on to win 11 more Grand Slam titles after the stabbing. 11. Her place in the tennis pantheon was permanently secured by a knife wound she did not inflict. Monica Seles came back in 1995 and managed to win exactly one more major, the 1996 Australian Open, but she never again ranked among the truly dominant players. She had lost her timing. She had lost the thing inside her that used to whisper when it matters most, "I won't miss." Ginter Parche never apologized to Monica Seles. He never went to prison. He achieved his goal and lived out the rest of his quiet, unbothered life. The knife slid in for an instant. The damage lasted forever. Number 3. Get off it. That's what producers were screaming into their headsets at Fox News headquarters in New York at the exact second Shepard Smith realized something had gone catastrophically wrong on his afternoon show. The 5-second delay, the one made specifically to prevent what was about to happen, had failed. September 28, 2012, a Friday afternoon, Fox News had cut into Shepard Smith's program Studio B to broadcast a live police pursuit unfolding on Interstate 10 in Arizona, about 75 miles from the California border. Joe Don Romero, a 33-year-old with a long criminal history and a desperate need to avoid returning to prison for parole violations, had carjacked a maroon Dodge Caliber at gunpoint. For over an hour, he led police on a high-speed hunt through the outskirts of Phoenix. This wasn't just a chase, it was a shootout. Romero was actively firing his .45 caliber Glock at the officers behind him, and, in a chilling escalation, at the Fox News helicopter hovering directly above him. As the chase reached its climax, Romero veered off the road and into the brush. He stumbled out of the red SUV, appearing disoriented and exhausted. On the Fox News live feed, anchor Shepard Smith was narrating the events. He even muttered, "Get off it."
Get off, get off, get off, get off, get off.
As Romero began to run, but the control room froze. As Romero pulled the handgun from his waistband, Shepard Smith's face returned to the screen, offering a frantic apology.
And we really messed up. And we're all very sorry.
That didn't belong on TV, but the apology couldn't scrub the internet. Because the incident happened on a major network, it was clipped and uploaded within minutes. While Fox News tried to bury the severe human error, the footage became a permanent fixture of the macabre corners of. The lawsuit filed by the mother of Romero's children painted a heartbreaking picture of the fallout, flashbacks, that their father's final moment was a piece of content for the world to dissect. It serves as a disturbing reminder that in the age of live streaming, and sometimes, the clock runs out. Number 2. January 13, 1982. A blizzard had paralyzed the capital. National Airport had reopened under marginal conditions. A Boeing 737 bound for Tampa was diced once, then sat on the taxiway for 49 minutes while fresh snow blanketed its wings. The captain, fearing further delay, did not call for a second de-icing. He did not switch on the engine anti-ice system. He pushed the throttles forward into a storm. The plane lifted, shuddered, and immediately began to fall. It clipped the 14th Street Bridge at rush hour, shearing the tops off 4 cars full of commuters who had thought their worst problem that day was traffic. Then it slammed nose first into the frozen Potomac and shattered. The tail section bobbed above the ice. The fuselage sank. Live news helicopters arrived within minutes and broadcast something Americans had never seen. Survivors clinging to chunks of wreckage in a half-frozen river while rescue lines dangled overhead. 6 people watching their own deaths approach in slow motion on national television. A passenger known only as the 6th man caught the rescue rope each time it was lowered. By the time the helicopter circled back for him, he had slipped beneath the ice. His name was Arland Williams. America watched him drown in real time. 78 people died that afternoon.
Florida Flight 90 crashed into the 14th Street Bridge just 30 seconds after takeoff.
A single hand reaching up from a river of ice, then nothing. Number 1. He was carrying groceries. That's the part nobody ever quite gets over. The most famous act of human defiance in the 20th century was performed by a man holding 2 plastic shopping. He looked like he was on his way back from running an errand. And then he stopped, calmly, in the middle of Beijing's Chang'an Avenue and stood directly in the path of a column of Type 59 battle tanks rolling away from a massacre. The most disturbing thing about Tiananmen Square isn't the body count. It's that the world saw it happen, and the country where it happened was forced, for 36 years and counting, to pretend it never did. Spring of 1989 had been intoxicating in Beijing. Students filled the square. Workers and pensioners joined them. Mothers brought rice. Doctors brought bandages. By late May, the crowd had swelled past 1 million people, all demanding the same impossibly simple things: less corruption, less censorship, a government that would actually listen. Foreign journalists who had flown in to cover Mikhail Gorbachev's state visit suddenly found themselves with a much bigger story. CNN was broadcasting live from inside the square. The world watched something that looked, for a few weeks, like a revolution unfolding in real time. On the night of June 3rd, the tanks came. The People's Liberation Army moved into the city in armored columns because the Chinese government has spent 36 years making sure it can't be. Soldiers fired live ammunition into crowds of unarmed civilians. Tanks rolled over tents where students were sleeping. The official Chinese figure was around 200 dead. A British diplomatic cable, declassified in 2017, put the real number at 10,000. The truth lies somewhere in that vast, deliberate fog. Hundreds of children, mothers, students, workers, ordinary Beijingers cut down in the streets of their own capital. An Associated Press photographer named Jeff Widener was holed up in a hotel room on the 6th floor of the Beijing hotel, swollen with the flu, his face still bruised from a brick that had hit him the night before. From his balcony, and waited for the tanks to come back. They did. He was about to take a long shot of the column when he saw something he didn't believe. A single figure stepping out into the road. The lead tank stopped. The man stopped. For nearly 2 full minutes, the entire mechanized weight of the People's Liberation Army was held at a standstill by one human being with nowhere to be but in front of it. He climbed onto the tank, shouted something into the hatch, climbed back down, and stood in front of it again. Then, 2 figures appeared from the side of the road and pulled him into the crowd. The tanks rolled on. The Chinese government has never acknowledged that he existed. Some sources claim he was executed within weeks. Others say he is still alive somewhere in mainland China. The photograph, taken by Widener and by 3 other foreign photographers from balconies that morning, was smuggled out of China inside a tourist's underwear, hidden in a tank of toilet water in the back of a Western reporter's hotel bathroom. Time magazine put him on its list of the 100 most influential people of the century. Inside China, the photograph has been scrubbed from existence. Search Tank Man on Chinese social media and nothing comes back. Type June 4th and the results vanish in real time. An entire generation of young people in Beijing has grown up not knowing the massacre happened. They have been shown photographs of Tank Man in interviews with Western journalists and asked what they see. Most of them say they don't recognize the picture. A few think it might be a military parade. The square itself is now full of tourists holding selfie sticks. Tour groups walk right across the patch of pavement where students were crushed in their sleep, smiling for photos in front of the Gate of Heavenly Peace. This is the rarest thing that can show. A live television moment that the world watched, that the world remembers, and that 1/5 of humanity has been forbidden from ever knowing happened. Which of these events do you find the most haunting? Drop the number in the comments. Like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. The next countdown will disturb you even more.